in the quiet heart of the Silverwood Forest, where moonlight filtered through ancient trees like streams of liquid silver, a tale of forbidden love was about to unfold. The Elves of Silverwood had always lived in secrecy, hidden from the mortal world, bound by ancient laws that forbade them from falling in love with outsiders. Yet on one fateful night, beneath a sky lit by a pale crescent moon, Elenor, a healer of unmatched grace, encountered a wounded human knight named Kael. He had strayed too far from the battlefield, his armor broken, his body bleeding. Against her better judgment, she reached out her hand to save him. That single act, simple and kind, was the spark that set their destinies on fire. Elenor knew the dangers of her actions. To heal a human was one thing, to harbor him in the heart of Silverwood was another. But when she looked into Kael's eyes, she saw not a soldier, but a man clinging desperately to life, and perhaps to something more. She carried him to her hidden grove, where the sound of waterfalls masked their voices, and the scent of moonflowers filled the air. For nights, she worked tirelessly, weaving spells of light and herbs of the forest to mend his wounds. Kael, in his delirium, whispered stories of courage, regret, and dreams that had long been buried by war. Slowly, what began as compassion turned into something unspoken, something Elenor could neither deny nor allow herself to feel. As Kael's strength returned, so did his awareness. He realized he was in a place that should not exist, a sanctuary bathed in magic that hummed with the lifeblood of the forest. And in its center stood Elenor, her presence brighter than the moon itself. He watched her hands move gracefully as she tended to his wounds, watched how the light seemed to bend toward her, as though the forest itself adored her. His heart, scarred by battles and betrayals, found an anchor in her silence, in her steady gaze. Yet he knew this was a fragile miracle. He was human, she was elf, and the world had never been kind to such unions. Still, each night, as the moon whispered above, he found himself falling deeper into the quiet tragedy that was love. Days turned into weeks. Kael, though still weakened, no longer cared for his past battles or the war that awaited him beyond the forest. Instead, he listened to Eleanor's voice, soft as the wind through leaves, as she told him stories of the Silverwood's ancient guardians, of rivers that remembered songs, of stars that carried secrets of the gods. He confessed in return his longing for peace, for a life unburdened by duty. Somewhere between her words and his silence, love blossomed. It was not declared, not spoken, but lived in the glances they shared, in the way her hand lingered near his, and in the hush of the forest that seemed to protect their secret. But love in silence is love that trembles. The laws of the elves were clear. No human could remain within their sacred lands, and no elf could bind their soul to a mortal. To do so would invite exile, or worse. Eleanor's heart waged war within her. Duty to her people, or the undeniable bond she felt with Kael. Each night, as she walked him beneath the glowing canopy, she asked herself how much longer this fragile dream could last. Kael, sensing her unease, did not press. Instead, he cherished each moment as if it were his last, knowing that a love forbidden is a love destined for sorrow. The breaking point came when the Moon Council, the ruling elders of the Silverwood, sensed the disturbance. Whispers reached their ears that Elenor had been hiding something, that her presence in the forest had grown heavier, burdened with secrecy. The elders, wise but stern, demanded the truth. Elenor denied nothing. She stood before them with unflinching resolve and confessed to healing the human, to keeping him hidden, and, though it tore her soul apart, to loving him. The council's verdict was merciless. Kael must leave the forest at once, never to return, and Eleanor's bond to him would mean her banishment if she disobeyed. When Kael learned of the council's decree, he felt the sharp sting of inevitability. His love for Elenor was pure, but purity was no shield against ancient law. He begged her to let him go, to remain in Silverwood where she belonged, where her people needed her. But Eleanor's heart had already chosen. "What is a healer without the one she longs to heal?" she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of love and loss. Together, they planned to flee, to cross the borders of Silverwood into the mortal world, where no council could bind them. It was a desperate choice, but love thrives in desperation. A night of their escape arrived, cloaked in shadows and silver mist. The forest seemed to sense their betrayal. Trees whispered warnings, roots curled to slow their steps, and the moon itself watched with mournful light. Elenor and Kael moved swiftly, their hands clasped tightly, their breaths ragged with fear and hope. But before they could cross the river that marked the end of Silverwood, the Guardians appeared, specters of light and shadow, sworn to protect the borders. Their voices rang like thunder. "No mortal shall pass, no elf shall forsake her vow." Elenor tightened her grip on Kael's hand, refusing to let go, even as the Guardians closed in. The battle that followed was not fought with swords, but with hearts. Elenor raised her magic against the Guardians, her light clashing with their ancient power. Kael, unarmed but unafraid, stood by her side, shielding her with his body whenever the shadows lunged. Together they resisted, but the forest itself turned against them. Branches clawed, rivers raged, the very earth trembled. It was then that Elenor made her choice. To save Kael, she unleashed the deepest part of her magic, a sacrifice that bound her life to his. Light burst across the river, scattering the Guardians, but the cost was carved into her soul. As the dawn broke, Kael carried Elenor across the river, his arms trembling, his tears falling freely. Her strength was fading, her light dimming, but her eyes held peace. "You are free now," she whispered, touching his face with trembling fingers. "Live for both of us." With her final breath, her body dissolved into silver mist, returning to the forest she had once called home. Kael screamed her name, his grief echoing across the valley, but the forest gave no answer. She was gone, and yet everywhere, the wind, the moonlight, the whispers in the trees, Kael wandered for days, hollow and broken, clutching only the memory of her touch. He returned to the mortal world, but nothing felt the same. The weight of his armor was heavier, the songs of men emptier. He carried her love like a wound that never healed, a wound that bled quietly beneath his skin. Yet at night, when the moon rose, he swore he could hear her voice, soft, distant, calling his name from beyond the veil. The world thought him mad, but he knew the truth. Love does not die, it transforms. Years passed, and Kael became a legend among men. They spoke of the knight who walked with sorrow, who carried secrets in his eyes. He never married, never sought another's hand, for his heart remained with the elf who had given her life for him. He wrote of her in hidden journals, of the forest that whispered and the moon that wept, hoping that one day someone would understand. His love was not a story of triumph, but of sacrifice, and in that sacrifice lay its beauty. In Silverwood, whispers of Eleanor's fate spread among the elves. Some called her a traitor, others a martyr, but the trees remembered her differently. They bloomed brighter where she once walked, and the river sang softer songs. On nights of full moon, even the council felt her presence in the wind, as if she had become part of the very soul of the forest. They spoke her name no longer, yet they could not forget her, for love leaves echoes, and her echo was eternal. As Kael aged, his body weakened, but his heart remained bound to Elenor. On his final night, beneath a sky painted with silver light, he closed his eyes and whispered her name one last time. And in that moment, the veil between worlds thinned. He saw her, radiant, timeless, waiting in the moonlight. She reached out her hand, and he took it. Together, they vanished into the night, their souls entwined beyond mortal law, beyond the reach of sorrow. Whispers in the forest told of two figures walking hand in hand, forever bathed in silver glow. And so, their story became a legend. Whispers in the Moonlight, a tragic love between an elf and a man, where sacrifice became eternal union. The world may forget, but the moon remembers, and the forest still hums with their love. And now, dear listener, the question is yours. What would you sacrifice for a love that defies all worlds? If you were captivated by this tale, join us here on Elven Hearts, where love, passion, and magic weave together in stories untold. Subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts below, and let your heart wander into the unseen. For the elves are listening, and perhaps tonight they whisper your name.